Hey friends, welcome to another video on one of my favorite topics, minimalism. And particularly today, something that has been very highlighted in my life over the last year or two, and that is how to declutter your entire book collection. I know this can be a really tricky category to simplify and minimize in your life. I can totally relate, and I wouldn't look at my bookshelf and think it's entirely minimalist by the stereotype. But I have found some really amazing questions, prompts, and reflections that have enabled me to be able to remove so many books from my collection over the last year, and I'd love to share those with you. It's important, of course, to acknowledge that books are generally tricky to declutter because they really hold, in many cases, sentimental value. We hold associations to our identity with the books that are on our bookshelf, whether other people actually get to see them or not. But freeing up some books, whether you have read them or you haven't read them, can be incredibly liberating and provide a lot of freedom and a great sense of space and simplicity. This video is going to focus on two overarching areas: the books that you already have, the books that you already own, and how to reduce the influx, the incoming of new books. The first step here is to go around your home or your apartment, your living space, and gather together all of the books that you own and then separate them into two distinct piles: the books that you have read and the books that you have not yet read. From here, I'm going to give you a whole host of prompts and reflections and questions to really ask yourself, and you're going to apply them to every single book. You're going to pick up every single book in both piles and really use these tools to reflect and make the decision as to whether or not you hold on to that book or not. One thing I'd like to highlight, which is something that I've personally done in my own space, is once I have determined the books that I'm going to keep, I'm going to still maintain that separation where I have all the books that I have already read together, and then I have a separate place for the books that I have not yet read. Now, they're literally in the same room, in the same corner, but I have a cube bookshelf, which is 4 by 2. And that carries all of my books that I have read, and I've organized them in a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing rainbow order or presentation. And then the books that I have not read sit on the very top of that cube bookshelf. So they are ultimately together, but they're not mixed together. The books that I have not yet read are not in a rainbow order, and they are at that level that I can see them, and I see them on a regular basis. So it's a constant reminder that they're there and that I can reach for them, and it really has worked. And the beauty here is that when you set up your books that you have not yet read, you're more inclined to pick them up and to really make a dent in that pile. And once you've read one of those books, you can start to use all these questions and reflections to determine whether or not you can move that book on. And that's what I'm really excited about, because there's a cluster in my personal pile of books that I've not yet read that I know 100% that I will be able to pass on when I've read them. Okay, let's dig into those questions. Firstly, is this book irreplaceable? In that, is it out of print or tremendously difficult to obtain? And if it is, that could be a really fair and reasonable reason to keep hold of it. But if it's easy to replace, let's keep moving on. Did someone gift me this book? Did someone gift you that book? If so, am I holding on to this out of guilt or obligation? Alternatively, can I donate it to be enjoyed by somebody else instead of it sitting there and collecting dust and putting that subconscious weight on my shoulders? All right, this is my personal favorite reflection, the one that I found to be the most potent, and that is, if I knew that I could loan or borrow this book anytime that I wanted, perhaps because I'm going to donate my own copy to the local library, then would I be able to let it go? So if you knew that you could obtain that book that you have or have not read at any time you wanted to from your local library, even if it means that you donate your own copy if it's not in the library system, could you let that go? Could you free up the space, the physical space, the mental space of having that book? Could you let the book go? If yes, great. Next question. If my home were to go up in flames and I lost this book, would I utilize my home contents insurance payout from the insurance company to purchase this book again, because your insurance, your payout from your insurance company is limited. Unless you have insured your possessions for way higher, your insurance payout's going to be limited. And so is this going to be a really imperative book for you to replace immediately? And if not, then perhaps you can let it go. Am I holding on to a book for my child, my children, my future children? If so, is it out of print, hard to find, irreplaceable? Again, that might be a fair reason to keep it. But if you have a child or children and you've already shared that book with them and they don't connect with it in the same way that you do, it might be a good reason to pass it on. Of course, if it's a book that you have read as an adult and you would love for your child, when they grow up, to be able to access this book and read it as an adult, we have to ask ourselves, is this in the best interests of our child? Particularly if you were to pass away, tomorrow, or in the near future, and your child was left with either the burden of not knowing what you even wanted to do with that book, not even realizing that you wanted them to have it or to read it, or having the weight of the world on their shoulders because they feel obligated to hold on to your stuff because they knew you wanted them to. Let us free up our children's futures by not burdening them with that load. Now, morbid thoughts aside, if you are going to be alive when your child is an adult, then we really want to free ourselves of the attachment of who we think that they might become and what their interests might be and what they might want to read, and let them to be free to be themselves, knowing full well that that book is probably very easily accessible for them by borrowing or in the library system in the future anyway. And so if it's really meant to be, it'll easily be. Okay, this is an important one. Am I holding on to this book because of who I believe it makes me? By owning this book, does it affirm an identity of myself that I am attached to? Someone that I wish to become or hope that other people perceive me to be, even if they're never going to see my book collection? Is this book a reflection of the future self I desire to be, a fantasy illusion that I have of myself, a way to affirm who I am to the world? And finally, what space could I free up in my life, physically and mentally, by decluttering this book? All right, time for part 2. Let's focus on minimizing that list of incoming books in the present and future. Before you go ahead and purchase a book, whether it's a physical book or an ebook, ask yourself these questions. Could I very easily loan this book from my local library system? Or could I very easily borrow this book from a friend? If I was to do a post on social media, is it possible, is it likely I'll find someone with a copy of this book? And can I use those 2 prompts as a means to accessing the book before I go out and purchase it? Now, I'm not telling you that you have to borrow the books that you want to read, but consider it as an option. And this is something that I committed to at the start of 2021. In this whole year, I will not purchase a single book for myself, which is kind of massive because I have had no issues spending money on books every single year for many, many years. So here is your golden rule to live by. If there is a book that I would like to purchase or obtain, I will go about seeking it out first of all from my local library, and if not successful there, seeing if I can access it from a friend or family member. Once I obtain that book, once I borrow, once I take a loan out on that book, knowing full well that you are more likely to proactively engage in reading it immediately from cover to cover to complete the book. Not only start the book, but to complete it and complete it in a timely fashion, because you're going to have to give it back to somebody, particularly the library system, because a library loan is limited in time, usually around 4 weeks. And particularly if it's a new book, it's likely going to have holds on it from other people. So you'll be much more inclined to really press through and read it, which is very, very satisfying. Once you've explored that or those options and you've completed the book, then give yourself permission to go out and purchase the physical book or the ebook version if you still wish to. So I'm not saying you can't buy a new book, but what I'm suggesting is that you take the opportunity to borrow the book first, preferably from your library, and read it, commit to reading it from cover to cover. And once you have finished the book, then give yourself the permission to buy it if it still feels important to you. And I can almost bet you probably will have no further desire to go out and purchase it because you've already read the book and you already have a means to accessing the book for free anytime you want because you've already done it. This has proven really successful for me in 2021. So as I've been working through my collection of books quite slowly that I still need to read, it's because I'm getting every book that I want to read this year from my local library. So I'm in the middle of reading a book that I personally own right now, but I have to keep putting it down because I get a library book coming in for me and I know there's other people with holds on it. So I'll go grab it and I'll read it from cover to cover, and then I go back to that book that I'm in the midst of reading that I own. So you figure out a system that works for you, but if you abide by that golden rule, you'll probably find that not only will you save a little bit of money in your bank balance, but you'll save a lot of space and a lot of hassle, and it's kind of a lot better for the planet too. Okay, one last little thing, and this is tying back in with something I've already said, but it's important to say, when you're considering purchasing a new book, is that book out of print? Is it really hard to obtain? Because some of you might have some really nuanced specific interests and curiosity around reading certain texts, particularly non-fiction books that are quite difficult to get a hand on. And in which case, then I think that is absolutely reasonable to want to go out and purchase that book as soon as you find it available. I know that last year I purchased quite a number of books secondhand online from a retailer in the United States, a secondhand specialized retailer, because they're not easy to get, they're no longer in print, and they're really, really important. And I've read them all and they're amazing resources. So there's nothing, black and white here, but hopefully all of these prompts have given you something to think about and really take your time with this process. Another beautiful thing is that you can keep coming back to your collection time and time again, once every month, once every 6 months, whatever works for you, depending on how big your collection is. And I know that I haven't decluttered a huge chunk just in one go. It's been a beautiful slow churn where I've created this understanding and awareness of my attachments, and that's what I wish for you, just to really unpack and uncover why you are attached, why you are holding on to all of these books, and really letting yourself go through that really nice, kind, gentle process of purging any excess and enjoying the freedom that comes with that. If you enjoy this content, please don't forget to subscribe below and do give this video a like or a thumbs up. And most significantly, please go ahead and leave me a comment below. I'd really love to hear from you. I'd love to know your biggest takeaway, or perhaps you might go through this process and come and report back and let me know how you got on, or anything that particularly you have found useful in purging those more sentimental items. Any really key questions that you've asked yourself that you've found very, very potent, because myself and anyone else watching this video would find that no doubt very, very useful. Happy reading. Go and start now and go dig into those amazing cherished books that you have not yet read. See you soon.